There is a quiet tragedy that most people never notice about themselves. It doesn't happen in a single moment, there is no dramatic breaking point, no cinematic collapse where everything falls apart at once. Instead, it happens slowly, almost invisibly, like a dimming light. A child who once trusted easily begins to hesitate, and a person who once forgave quickly starts to keep score. Someone who once believed in people begins to expect disappointment. And one day, without ever realizing when it happened, they are no longer who they used to be. This is not a rare story. It is in many ways a very common one. And that's precisely why the story of Naruto Uzumaki matters. Because Naruto lived a life that should have turned him into something far darker than what most of us have become. And yet, somehow it didn't. The world tried to turn him into a villain and it failed. To understand why this matters, we have to begin not with Naruto, but with ourselves. Every person begins life in a similar way, not identical, but close enough. As children, we are open in ways that feels mostly reckless. We laugh loudly, we trust easily, and forgive without any hesitation. We do not calculate every interaction or guard every emotion. There is a kind of emotional courage in children, a willingness to engage with the world without any armor. It is not that children are naive, it is that they have not yet learned to be afraid. But over time, the world begins to teach, and it teaches through disappointment, betrayal, through moments that feel in isolation but heavy in accumulation. A broken promise here, a harsh word over there, and a friendship that ends without any explanation. Trust that is given and never returned, and effort that goes unnoticed. Each experience by itself may not seem significant, but together they form a pattern. And slowly, something changes. We became more cautious, more guarded, more skeptical, and we start to protect ourselves, first in small ways, and then in larger ones. And then we tell ourselves that we are being realistic, and we say we have learned from experience. But what we rarely admit is that we also have lost something, and we have lost a version of ourselves that believed in people without any hesitation. Now imagine a life where this process does not happen gradually, but all at once. This is where Naruto's story begins, from the moment he was born. He was not simply ignored or misunderstood. He was rejected, not by one person, not by a small group, but by an entire village. He grew up without parents, without guidance, without anyone to explain to him why he was treated the way he was. He was alone in a way that most people will never experience, and worse, he did not even understand why. The people around him looked at him with suspicion, with fear, sometimes with outright hatred. He was blamed for something he did not choose, something he could not control, and to them, he was not a child. He was a reminder of something they feared. And so, instead of receiving warmth, he received distance. Instead of kindness, he received silence. And instead of the love that he deserved, he received rejection. Now, if the world slowly teaches most people not to trust, Naruto's world tried to force that lesson on him from the very beginning. And by all logic, by all patterns we understand about human behavior, Naruto should have grown into someone resentful, bitter, and angry at the world, and he had every reason to be. But he chose not to. And to understand how unusual this is, we need to look at someone who walked a path that feels far more familiar, Obito Uchiha. At first glance, Obito and Naruto are remarkably similar. Both began as a hopeful, energetic, and deeply emotional individual. Both wanted recognition, and both of them dreamed of being a Hokage not for power, but for acknowledgement. They were not born different, but they became different. Now, Obito's turning point came through loss. The death of someone he cared about deeply shattered his worldview, and it introduced him a kind of pain that felt unbearable, a kind of injustice that seemed impossible to accept. And in that moment, Obito made a decision. He decided that the world itself was broken, that hope was an illusion, that connection only led to suffering. It is important to understand that Obito did not become what he became because he was weak. In many ways, his reaction is deeply human. When pain becomes overwhelming, the instinct to protect oneself is natural. To close off, to stop believing, to detach from others before they can hurt you again. And these are not signs of evil, they are signs of someone just trying to survive. And this is what makes Obito's story so unsettling, because I think most people can relate and they can understand. But when you place Naruto right beside him, Naruto experienced loneliness long before he understood what connection even felt like. He was denied the very things that Obito lost later in life. If Obito's pain was a sudden collapse, Naruto's once was a constant weight. And yet, when faced with the same fundamental question, what kind of person will I become because of this? Naruto answers different. He did not decide that the world was broken. He decided that he would not let it break him. This does not mean that he was unaffected. There's every right to be angry. Naruto was angry, he felt sad, and he obviously felt a deep, aching loneliness of being unseen and unwanted. There are moments where he acted out, moments where he sought attention in ways that seemed disruptive or immature, just like when he painted the faces of the Hokages. But beneath all of that was something remarkably consistent. He still wanted to connect and wanted to be acknowledged, and he wanted to believe in some quiet, stubborn way that people could change. And this is where Naruto's strength truly lies, and not in his OP abilities or power, but in his refusal to let pain dictate his identity. And that's why he's so famous for his talk no jutsu, changing the ways of even Zabuza. Most people do not become villains, and many become smaller versions of themselves. They just trust less, they open up less, they give less, and they expect less. They begin to approach life with a quiet resignation, as if disappointment is not just possible, but it's like completely unavoidable. It's inevitable. And in doing so, they protect themselves. They also limit themselves and do all sorts of things that does not produce a very authentic kind of picture of what they are or who they are. But Naruto represents the opposite. He chooses to remain open in a world that has given him every reason to close off. He chooses to believe in people who have not yet given him a reason to. He chooses to reach out even when it would be easier not to. I know this is not for everyone. Not everyone can be like Naruto because it requires some form of emotional discipline. Some would classify this under naive optimism, but I would like to feel or believe that this is a form of a very strong emotional discipline. And just to touch on to the lore again, there is a moment early in Naruto's life where this trajectory could have changed. That moment comes in the form of Iruka. Iruka was not a savior in a dramatic sense. He did not erase Naruto's pain completely or just fix his life. What he did was something much more simpler and perhaps more powerful. He acknowledged who he was. He saw Naruto as not a burden, not a problem, but just as a person. And that single act of recognition created a shift. It did not completely remove Naruto's loneliness, but it intercepted the flow. It introduced the idea that the connection was possible, that he was not entirely alone in this world. And sometimes it does not take a perfect life to change someone's path. Sometimes it just takes one person who just chooses to care. And this brings us back to the question that sits at the center of this story. Why didn't Naruto become like Obito? Why didn't he give in the same conclusions about the world? The answer isn't simple, but it is clear. He just made a choice. Naruto made a choice. Not once, but repeatedly over and over again. Every time he was rejected, every time he was hurt, he didn't reflect that back tenfold. He chose not to reject others. He chose not to inflict the same kind of hurt that they have given to him. Every time he was given a reason to give up on people, he chose to believe again. And this is not easy. It's not everyone can do this kind of things. Not everyone can stomach the amount of pain that he endured and chose not to grow evil. Because it may be one of the most difficult things a person can do. Because choosing to remain open means accepting the risk of being hurt again and again. Choosing to trust means accepting the possibility of betrayal. And choosing to believe in people means accepting that some of them will disappoint you. Naruto simply does not avoid these risks. He accepts them. And I feel like his story is just more than a character arc. It becomes a reflection. Because if we are honest, most of us have at some point stood at the same crossroads. Not in the same dramatic circumstances, of course, but in quieter, more personal ways. Moments where we had the option to stay open or to just close off. To trust again or to withdraw. To believe in someone or assume the worst in them. And in many of those moments, we just choose the safer option. Because we have to protect ourselves, right? And there is nothing inherently wrong with that. But over time, those choices accumulate and they shape who we become. And it just forms that lens that you want to see in the world. If you have a lens that assumes the worst in people, all you see is evil in the world. So again, the question is not whether the world will change you or will try to change you, because it will. But the question is how you will respond when it does. Will you become more guarded, more distant, or skeptical? Or will you find a way, however difficult, to remain open? Naruto's story does not suggest that one path is easy and the other is hard, because both are difficult. One requires you to constantly defend yourself, but the other requires you to constantly risk yourself. And in the end, Naruto did not change the world simply through strength. He changed it through persistence, and through the consistent, often painful decision to believe in something better. He proved that pain does not have to define a person, that the past can explain you, but it does not have to decide who you become. And personally, most importantly, he proved that even a world that tries to turn you into something else, you still have a choice. Reminds me of what Spider-Man says to Sandman. Now, the world tried to turn Naruto Uzumaki into a villain, and it gave him every reason to become one, and it failed. The more uncomfortable question is this: when the world tried to change you, did it succeed? Alright, thanks for watching this video, guys. My name is Nostalgia. Now, if you like videos like this, check out my channel where I make videos about anything and everything that helps us be a better human being. Subscribe!